Well. It appears that Jimmy Dore has been exposed. So Jimmy Dore's, quote, very pro-employer work contracts have been revealed to not exactly be as pro-employee as he tries to claim that he is. Now, Jimmy Dore is a weird fellow. He's a right-wing grifter. He's kind of an enigma to me because I'm unclear as to what his actual motivations are, and I'm psychologically just super fascinated to know what drives Jimmy Dore. Like, what motivates Jimmy Dore to put out content, wake up in the morning? Like, what is his goal? Is it ego? Is it fame, attention, money? What is it? Because I know for sure it's not policy principles because he's violated them on multiple occasions. He supported Tulsi Gabbard when she was not in favor of Medicare for all. He was actually still supporting her when she had actually even endorsed Joe Biden. So he's clearly not actually about policy principles, and he was going against Joe Biden when he was pulling out of Afghanistan. He was joining the mainstream media and criticizing him instead of coming out and saying, no, like this is manufactured consent against him. So he's clearly doesn't care about policy. He never has. And we're going to see some evidence about this later on too. It's not policy. It's something else. Now, what is the other thing? That's what I'm curious about. I would love to know. But this basically goes down to break down. It says, what documents obtained by important contexts reveal that labor is not necessarily winning at Dore's own show. An independent contractor agreement, which is used by Dore's production company, 4Door Productions, 4DP, in the summer of 2020 contains several harsh provisions that disadvantage workers, including forced arbitration. Former friends and colleagues of Dore's told important context that the agreement was not out of character for the comedian. Very pro-employer. The agreement from 4DP includes clauses that are very protective of the company and Dore, legal experts told important context. The document contains a thorough 9-part, 3-page long confidentiality section, effectively prohibiting contractors from discussing anything they learned about Dore, his wife, or their collaborators on the job, including details about their business, personal lives, finances, investments, and more. And so there's this clause here. I'm not going to read out the clause to you. But so what this basically means is, because there's a lot of character issues that are, speculated or just straight out seen from Jimmy Dore. I remember even one live stream he did where it was like there were some technical difficulties. And so he was just being like a complete massive piece of shit to like the cameraman, just treating him like complete garbage, which is obviously not surprising, right? But basically it's like, oh, like if he's, abusive or an asshole or an alcoholic or does drugs or something, I guess this contract is like a really good way to be like, you can't tell anybody the abuse that I was doing or that I was abusing this, substance or whatever, whatever was going on. It's like a very convenient way to do it. And then it's citing something about him calling Trump's use of confidentiality agreements with volunteers very right-wingy. It says the consequences for workers who breach Dore's confidentiality section or another extensive section requiring contractors to sign away their rights to work product can be severe under the agreement. Breaches and even threatened breaches constitute immediate and irreparable harm, entitling Dore's company to equitable non-monetary relief, meaning contractors could be ordered to refrain from the activity. The agreement further stipulates that breaches entitle Dore's company to liquidated damages, which are agreed upon damages for failing to meet a specific contractual obligation in the amount of $10,000 per breach. So $10,000 per breach. So it's a very, very predatory, thing. And so the question here, I'm sure you're asking, well, Jimmy Dore stands are going to say, oh, well, isn't this stuff just, common in the work industry? This is totally normal. You're just tagging Jimmy Dore for this. First of all, the whole point of Jimmy Dore is that he's different, right? Supposedly he's not, right? He's different in a bad way, although he's not really different when you think about it. But the whole point of watching Jimmy Dore in the first place is, oh, he's actually not normal. It's kind of like the whole point, right? That's the entire point of his show. So again, your argument is debunked. But here, check this out. This is interesting right here, right? So what it says is, these provisions are, quote, the hallmark of a very pro-employer employment contract, Alan Hyde, a distinguished professor and Sidney Reitman scholar at Rutgers Law School, told important context. Hyde noted that the provisions were of dubious enforceability, particularly the liquidated damages clause due to its high dollar figure. They have to be reasonable forecasts at the time of contracting of the harm, which this one isn't because it's $10,000 irrespective of what the harm is. Philip Harvey, a law and economics professor, also at Rutgers Law School, agreed that Dore's contract was heavily titled in favor of himself, calling it very employer-friendly. Harvey told important context Dore's attorney had been clever, drafting a contract with the financial amount that was high enough to disincentivize minor breaches of confidentiality, like being loose-lipped at a bar, but low enough for courts to allow in the event of major breaches, like writing a best-selling book containing personal details about Dore. So again, these are experts that are citing this. So you, random guy, me, random guy, like none of us, our opinion really matters, right? What matters is, what do the experts on the issue say? Is this something that's very pro employer, and is this, something that's not normal? And so they're saying, yeah, this is very pro employer. They're not saying, oh, this is like a normal, typical. No, it's not. And even if it were normal and typical, I mean, the job market is super, super rigged against workers, right? So why would you want it to be, normal? It doesn't make sense. The whole point of Jimmy George is supposed to be that he's somebody who's not normal. It's the entire point, right? And so these are the people's opinion that matter. We've gotten to a point now, I think social media is a mistake because we've democratized truth. So any idiot can say anything they want without any actual credentials. Those are the people with actual credentials. And then here's another one. It says forced arbitration. And so this is, I guess, a way to be able to do it in secret so that you have to waive your right to be able to do a civil trial by jury. So this is although common in many work contracts, sometimes preferred in union workplaces, and often faster than litigation, arbitration can present obstacles to relief for workers. For example, it deprives workers of their ability to be heard by a jury. The 40P contract spells this out explicitly, stating, quote, the parties understand that by signing this agreement, they give up their rights to a civil trial in a court of law and waive their right to a trial by jury. Wow. So in order to sign a contract with them, you have to waive your right to trial by jury, which is very, very heavily in favor of him. And here we go again with the actual expert quotes, not some random. It says, juries have jobs and they know that bosses overreach. Hyde told important context. Arbitration is much more favorable for employers. They can keep it secret. They don't have to have publicity. They don't have to face a jury. So that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to hide it so that he's trying to prevent the ability for people to know about his abuses of employees, right? Once a decision has been rendered by an arbitrator, workers have little recourse. As the National Association of Consumer Advocates warns, arbitrators aren't required to take the law and legal precedent into account in making their decisions. There's no appeal or public review of decisions to ensure the arbitrator got it right. Arbitrators are notoriously pro-employer, allowed them to keep more than $9.27 billion in wages owed to non-union workers, making less than $13 an hour. Arbitration can also be expensive. Harvey called the arbitration clause the provision that is most unfavorable to the subcontractor, noting that under the terms of the agreement, the costs of arbitrating are shared between the parties, and the prevailing party is entitled to attorney's fees. So basically, it's just saying this is super, super predatory, basically, is what that's saying to summarize it. Really, really predatory towards the employee. And then here we go. We get some personal stuff about who is Jimmy Dore? Who is this guy? This is pretty interesting. This is a day in the life of working with Jimmy Dore. Former friends and colleagues of Dore's told important context they were not surprised by the mismatch between the comedian's rhetoric and the employer-friendly provisions in the 40P agreement. I don't think he's grounded in ideology, so I don't think he views treating all workers the same way I would, said fellow comedian Dave Anthony, a former longtime friend of Dore's. So this kind of gives you like sort of a sort of background into who this guy is. Who the fuck is Jimmy Dore, right? And so you can kind of tell when people are like, oh, they're kind of like somebody who came from maybe acting, didn't work out, and they're like a Dave Rubin, where it's like you just fake whatever you believe, you don't actually believe something. Or maybe you see someone who's like a Sam Cedar or Kyle Kalinske who's like clearly grounded in what they believe and say, or like a Ben Shapiro or someone like that. Whereas this guy, I think, is just kind of a weasel. It's like a weasel flip-flopper that just goes with whatever gives him the most money, attention, fame, and that kind of a thing is what I believe. And so you can see that he's not clearly grounded in ideology. He doesn't really have any, I think. I think he's just kind of just goes with the waves kind of thing, basically. This is Dan Evans, former TYT associate producer, worked on a show. Aggressive Progressives offered up a similar diagnosis, explaining he is not really that ideological, but knows a couple of his buzzwords and knows how to do his canned rants that he's been doing for almost a decade at this point. Yeah, so it just seems to me like Jimmy Dore really is kind of like the classic grifter. I don't think he's ideological. I think he just has like these buzzwords and ways to basically be able to, signal to his audience like his virtue or ideas or whatever to get them to support him. And he's very weaselly in terms of not being clear on who he supports. Whether I know he supports Trump, he loves Trump, but he won't say it. He won't say it out loud, which is bullshit. He said it in like a weird way where he was like, oh, if you're anti-war, you should have voted for Trump. So by that logic, Aristotelian logic we could use, he should have voted for Trump. So it's like he supports him, but he's just too much of a bitch to come out and say it. Like that's the ultimate loser. Like when you have to hide what you believe like on purpose, so it's so weak. So I mean, that sort of contract lines up with the kind of person who may have had issues with workers in the past and wants to protect themselves, I haven't said, but in like broader context, is a person who causes issues with the people he works with. So this is just basically, and then he has like, he harassed, Anna Kasparian, sexually harassed Anna Kasparian at work. And I guess he did it in front of like her students, which is like even puts it at a whole nother level in terms of like, holy shit, like this guy's like really a piece of shit. I mean, I would say like, men are garbage in general, I would say, but so it's not surprising that Jimmy Dore is like that, I would say. But this guy is like, this guy right here, this guy who's laughing right here. I don't know who this guy is. Who the fuck is Jimmy Dore? I'm just so fascinated to know, who is this guy? What is he motivated by? Because it's not ideology. So if it's not ideology, what drives this guy? What is the synthesis of his thoughts? When he wakes up in the morning, is he like, yo, I need to do whatever gets the most views? Do I need to do whatever gets the most money, the most comments supporting me? Because it's not ideology, it's not principle, it's not like for me, I would say for me, it's kind of like an intellectual sort of loyalty for me. I just kind of like try to look at things from my perspective, like critically think, and whatever I believe is what I go with. I don't even set myself as having like a set dogma or anything. I do have like a set of principles in terms of like, oh, like improving people's lives and growing like workers' paychecks and increasing jobs and increasing livelihoods and the good livelihoods. And then how I get there just kind of depends upon intellectual exercise and thought. Not dogmas. A lot of progressives just go based off dogmas, like, oh, bring the jobs back. It's not like, oh, let's increase workers having jobs. It's like, no, let's bring the jobs back, which is like weird. Instead of a philosophical first principle, it's like, oh, let me go based on a dogma, which I think that's dumb. But anyways, who is this guy? I don't know who he is and what he is, but it's just such a soulless, like, trash life, honestly, to just be a grifter, weaselly grifter. It's just got to be such a trash. Like, how do you even live with yourself just knowing that, like, you're just a fraud? I don't know. It's just super fascinating to me because, like, who is this guy, man? Who is this guy?